Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So before we get into our conversation, I just want to do a little stage setting for the audience. So I want each of you to tell us a little bit about your role and how it relates to IoT or how IoT is integrated into your role. Ed, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, thanks. So I lead the enterprise IoT efforts for Samsung here in the US. That means my whole life, my whole job, everything I do is about IoT. My responsibilities are to bring together this huge conglomerate that I work for to bring all the piece parts and deliver integrated strategies and solutions for customers. I have everything from product development and design to interaction with customers and building a partner ecosystem to help solve problems.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Hwang. I'm the Program Manager for Innovation Management with the City of Philadelphia. And my primary role is working in the central IT department to the city. And I manage our Smart City PHL initiative. That is our strategic program that is engaging all the different departments that are inside city government to understand what types of advanced technology deployments different departments are working on and how we can collaborate together. And so my main priority right now is to develop our technology roadmap on how Philadelphia is going to establish its smart city infrastructure.
And I'm Sri Ilaprolu, part of Amazon Web Services public sector team. I head up our IoT practice focused on public sector customers. So at AWS, we define public sector as governmental bodies, that's state and local, municipal, federal, defense, etc. Educational institutions all the way from K-12 into higher ed research institutions, as well as not-for-profit institutions. So think about American Heart Association, Red Cross, and institutions like that. So as part of the IoT practice, our role and my team's role is to work with customers and partners to build a strong ecosystem, all the way from sensor manufacturers to connectivity providers into solution providers, so that when cities or federal institutions or educational institutions, anyone for that matter around the world, they're looking to deploy IoT or sensor-based solutions, we have a full complement of capabilities that we bring to bear. In that role, I've worked with customers around the world, so multiple geographies. I was joking earlier in the back room there that I travel quite often. That's probably not an understatement there, but that's part of the job, is to work with customers, guide them through the process as they're taking their first steps into the sensor world or connected world, what the process could look like, provide them best practices, and show them the path so that their projects become successful in the long run.
So I've heard it said before that when we think about Internet of Things, sometimes the focus is too much on the thing, on the actual technology that's being developed, and not so much on kind of the broader picture. So I'm wondering how, Ed and Sri specifically, how do you guys think about keeping in mind the technology that's available and that you're excited about, but also kind of the broader solution that you're trying to work on?
Well, I'll tell you, that's the thing that keeps me up most at night, because oftentimes as we start to engage with customers, as we start to have IoT-based conversations, it starts with that technology. It starts with, I have these things, I want to do something with them. It's like when I was a kid and you had an erector set. I'm dating myself, right? You wanted to build something. And really, our whole strategy and our whole approach is to turn that conversation around, to really start with, what is it you're trying to accomplish? What problem are you solving? What benefit do you want to bring to your customers, to your constituents? And then let's talk about the things that are in your kit bag to allow you to do that effectively. If you don't start with an outcome-based discussion, at the end of the day, you end up with a really cool erector set of stuff that you can't do anything with. And so we really push that on our customers and on our own thinking, because we are, at our core, a company that builds stuff. But we start by building based on what customers need.
Sure.
And I'll echo those sentiments. The way I talk to customers and those interactions go is starting from the outcome. What is it that you're trying to achieve, and work your way backwards? And for me and our teams, data is at the center of all of this, right? The reason why you deploy sensors is, number one, to collect data. The more you get, the more you're able to analyze and therefore make better decisions. And number two, in some cases, you want to send that intelligence back out to the physical world and react to things real time. So if you start looking at the data as the core or the center of the solution, and work your way backwards to what kinds of sensors do I need to deploy, and more importantly, why? What am I trying to accomplish? What kind of data do I need to collect in order to make the right decisions? And then what reactions, real-time or latent-based reactions, do I want to send into the physical world? So I think looking at the problem, starting with the goal in mind, working your way backwards, identifying what kind of technologies do you need, whether it's sensor-based, or in some cases, as we're going through the conversation, we'll find out that it's not really sensor-based solution that the customer needs. It may be data analytics. Right? They already have the data, they just don't know how to analyze it, so conversation tilts towards that. So I think looking at the outcome or the desired outcome, working your way backwards, and keeping data at the center of all of that.
Could I chime in?
Yeah,
so I think I'm a little bit unique on the panel in that I am the customer that they're talking about
exactly.
oftentimes.
Why we put you in the middle.
All right, it still has to go through a competitive process. No, I'm just kidding. So one of the things that has been really important to us over in Philly, and that I'm finding in a lot of other city government groups, is that we are trying to better understand what it is departments are trying to solve for, and that's something that is shared here. And I think what's exciting right now is that we are in a time where government is really being challenged to not only participate in the tech economy, but also become a partner in developing what we are trying to go in terms of advanced technology, the future, and all of that stuff. And so a lot of the job that I have to do is to go to different departments, understand what is your priority? What is it you're trying to work for? What is it you're trying to solve for? A good anecdote that I can share with you today is, and we were talking about this in the back room, is I met with our Parks and Recreation team, and for the 80-plus park sites that we have all across Philadelphia, there's only 3 park rangers for the entire city park system, which is kind of ridiculous. But the capacity is low, and one of the things that they have a challenge with is noise complaints in these park systems. You'll have people come out from the neighborhood, they'll bring these huge concert grade speakers in their vans, and they'll just blast it over the weekend, and the neighbors that are residing right next to these parks, they have complaints. Right now, what ends up happening for the most part is that Monday morning, you'll check your voicemail and you'll have these noise complaints that have already passed and gone, and no one was able to address that complaint. Part of the reason why is because the park rangers are roaming around, they're working overtime, but they have no way of prioritizing what sites they need to be visiting and making sure that they have their attention on. And so where IoT could play a role in this is actually being able to deploy sensors that connect these park rangers to when there's an instance of some level of noise in these park systems, actually ping them in real time, and they could actually know exactly where they need to go during their shift. And so in that way, we're actually able to make their routes more efficient. It could be more focused. But that conversation wouldn't have happened unless we understood, like, here is the problem over at Parks and Rec. We don't have enough staff capacity. This is one of our largest complaints that we're getting from our neighborhoods. What could we do about it? And then you bring in the technologists in the room and you present that challenge. And I think this is where it's exciting for you all. Yeah. It's like, we'll build it, right? So,
absolutely. We started to architect a solution in the back room. We really did.
Yeah.
It started with AWS data down to wearables for park rangers that routed them to the right place at the right time. Right. This is how the process needs to work, though.
And then we procure it, and then we go through that really nice contracting process that we call RFPs.
Yeah. All right, so we just kind of got a, little view of how that might work. I'm wondering, when we think more broadly about making cities smarter on a broader scale of addressing not just one problem, not just the park ranger problem, but all of these problems that so many cities have, and they're different in each city. What are the biggest challenges that you guys are facing when it comes to building the products, and then what are the biggest challenges that you're facing when it comes to, in Philadelphia, assessing those problems and then getting those tools built?
Should I start?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'll address in 2 different areas. One, which is more of the kinds of problems that we're already seeing with cities, which is, I'll refer to it as a silo effect, right? Where cities have individual departments within cities may have moved forward, purchased or acquired solutions that do the job, but that's it. They don't talk to other systems. There's no way of integrating the systems behind the scenes, which is a problem, because if you think about it, a large city, there is so much that needs to be shared between teams, between solutions. For example, if there is a traffic routing system or a transportation system, there's value in that system being able to react and integrate with public safety systems so that your police and fire teams know when there is an accident or an issue on the roads, they can react to it real time, as opposed to waiting for that whole complaint process to take its way. So that's one problem that we're seeing consistently. And the good news there is a lot of cities are stepping back. Even if they've started on the smart city path, holding plans in place and stepping back a little, thinking about that horizontal layer that needs to be in place before they start full force into smart city solutions. The second area that we're starting to see some concerns from cities, and we're helping and addressing in that space, is this is an emerging space, right? There's not a lot of successful blueprints that other cities can just copy. Most cities are still in the early steps of the journey. So experimentation becomes extremely important. And the process that currently exists, as Ellen was saying, the procurement process, the whole acquisition process, doesn't lend itself easily for experimentation, right? So what if there was an option where a city can pick one or multiple solutions that address a specific problem, try pilots or POCs, proofs of concepts, in parallel, get the results in a matter of weeks, maybe months, depending on the solution, and then decide to move forward with the solution that makes the most sense. That's another area where agility becomes a huge, very important factor that cities need to consider, and that's an area that we're starting to see and help in that space as well.
And do you agree with that?
I agree with everything you said, Sri. I'll add two other points that we see. One is that the ubiquity of delivery, depending upon what you are doing, is a challenge. All of your constituents in the city need access to information, need access to technology. You've got to deliver it in a way that it can go across multiple devices, multiple platforms, multiple ways of it being consumed. Many times, and we were talking about this before, in multiple languages, right? So that ability to take that data, take the insights, not the data, the insights, and get them down to that last mile is another big challenge we're seeing. The other thing I'll say is that this is not just a problem for the public sector. The same problem exists in private sector. When you're trying to connect different departments in a hospital or in a hospital network to one another, when you're trying to connect disparate departments in an enterprise together, these same issues exist. Maybe it's not the antiquated procurement process, but just even though we're talking about smart cities, recognize these same problems, challenge everybody regardless of public or private sector.
Yeah. Ellen, what are the biggest hurdles that you're facing when you're thinking about how to bring smart city IOC technology to not just the Parks Department, but to everyone in the city?
Yeah, I think an elephant in the room oftentimes in my conversations are our legacy systems. They're our favorite. We've had them for a long time. We're almost married to them. We are married to them. But I think a lot of people right now are still at a place where they're like, we have this hunky, old, outdated system, and how are we gonna? And we're still trying to work through that, and we're going through middleware, and it's costing us, X amount of dollars, and we've had to renew the contracts over, several administrations. And I think a lot of people are frustrated by these huge contract opportunities and large technology, these technology refreshes that happen over the course of many years. And they're like, okay, and now you want to talk about advanced technology and drones and integration of all these different things. We can't get it even right in our department. And so I think working with the folks who have gone through a lot of those challenges over the last decade or so in city government, I think is one of the most important things about the Smart City conversation, is understanding their pain points, understanding where do they want to go when they first conceived of these projects, and how do we actually support them in solving some of the challenges that they were facing over the last several years. And what kind of new solutions have emerged since then that can actually alleviate a lot of the burdens that they're experiencing now? And are there ways in which we can work with existing contracts to actually to maybe pursue a different path? So those are some tricky conversations. They take time. They take a lot of relationship building. We are central IT, so in a lot of ways, we are customer facing in the way that actually our colleagues are our customers in city government. And so a lot of that is also making sure that each department knows that we want to be their partner. We don't want to impose a new standard on them. But on the flip side, it's also in terms of smart city conversation is this notion of interoperability, being able to integrate different departments, data sets, their software, their hardware systems to be communicating across the city. And so when they feel a really strong ownership of their own system and their own way of doing things and their own technology, and then asking them like, hey, do you mind having a conversation with this other department? They're thinking about doing something really similar. We want to make sure that moving forward it all talks together. That requires a lot of time. But I think that the light at the end of the tunnel is that people are really excited and hungry to get there finally. Because for so many years they've been working under these like legacy systems and things just constantly being frustrating and being really expensive. And so this notion of sharing that burden across the city, I think, is something that has shed a bit of hope in city government.
I want to let our audience know that after I ask a few more questions, we're going to come to you guys for some questions. We'll have runners, so think about your questions now, condense them down, and then just raise those hands up high once we get to the question and answer period. So my colleague Laura Bliss recently wrote a piece about smart cities and about the concern that as we integrate smart city technology, there will still be some people who get left behind, right? And oftentimes that those will be some of the people who could most benefit from systems that operate better, that are cheaper, et cetera. You mentioned the need to be able to deploy information to everyone in a bunch of different ways, sometimes in different languages, et cetera. I'm wondering how you guys are thinking about solving that problem. So not just the issue of how to get this technology to city governments, but then how city governments can wisely deploy that so it's meeting the needs of everyone.
So there's a lot that we're actually trying to do in this space, and it's part of recognizing that as a technology provider, we have to give back as part of these solutions as well, right? You can't take and deploy a solution that's got a $1,000 endpoint for the constituent that they have to access, right? You have to think about ways that you can deliver technology that is consumable. And if that means you've got to put different endpoints, different experiential points out into the marketplace, that's part of the investment that you have to make. That's part of the investment you have to make as a partner in a city environment. But the reality is there's no clean, easy answer. You're not just going to parachute in a bunch of tech and let people go grab it where they need to. We talked about there's a whole group of constituents who are afraid to touch technology. Right? And so part of what you have to really be thinking about is what are the right ways to drive interaction that are going to get usage, that are going to get embraced in an environment? Is it going to be voice-based technology? Is it going to be tablet or touch-based technology? Is it something we haven't thought about yet? VR, AR types of interactions. But this is where, again, there's no clean, here's the answer. But these are the things that you need to challenge the partners you work with to help you solve for, right? It gets back to our first comment about start with the problem. If the problem is getting technology into areas of underutilization, right? There's a lot of conversations that we can have about how to do that. I'm not going to give you one answer because it would depend upon that individual conversation.
Yeah, how are you guys thinking about that, Alan?
Yeah, so I'll echo some of the sentiments, right? So one of the things that and stepping back at the broader Amazon level, we always look at things from how can we make it easy for consumers to be able to produce, on the retail side, obviously it's for purchasing things, but for any other area as well, how can we make it easy for consumers and customers to use the services that we're bringing to market? Which means lowering the technology barrier and making it as easy to use, at the same time, security baked right from the get-go so that the end user doesn't have to think about how do I make sure that it is secure from a transaction point of view. Coming back to the smart city discussion, right? So the areas that you're touching on are more of the digital divide questions that we often get asked. Is this the modern technology, the sensor-based technology? Is it only for technology knowledged citizens, or is this something that everyone can take advantage of? Answer is absolutely everyone. That should be the end goal. Some of the ways that we're starting to see customers adopt this is voice technology, right? You've heard of Alexa, and we're starting to see the promise of Alexa in state and local space much rapidly than we expected. A number of states and cities have incorporated Alexa as one of the mediums through which citizens interact with IT systems. I'll give you some examples. If you are in state of Utah and you're in the process of driving license or driver's license, all of that transaction and interaction can be done through Alexa in your own home. If you're in state of Georgia, 78 plus digital properties from state of Georgia are all Alexa enabled. So you can either walk into an office, you can go online and navigate through the web properties, or you can just use your voice, which is a very easy and natural way that humans interact in. Use that as a medium to interact and get the information that you need, as well as submit information when it's appropriate. Right, so we're starting to see voice also become one of the main mediums or streams in which interaction between humans and IT systems is starting to take effect. That helps because it lowers the barrier for, if you think about people that are not as comfortable using technology, or maybe in cases where they do not have access to technology, and taking voice technology and embedding it into everyday systems. It doesn't have to be through an Echo or an Echo Dot. It could be any speaker-based system which can be voice enabled. Right, even your smartphones, even on a browser, right? Where instead of me navigating and trying to find systems, touch a microphone icon on a website, start talking to it as naturally as you would. And sites will respond back, and it navigates and allows you to interact with it in a voice-based format. So that's another area that I think as we evolve, more and more solutions will start coming into play.
And did you want to quickly
Yeah, I think for us, inclusion can't be and inclusion, it has to be at the center. You have to make it a point. You have to make it a priority. Otherwise, it just kind of gets thrown off to the side, and you maybe throw a few dollars there to do some sort of program or project. But when we talk about inclusion, we're trying to define that every step of the way. Where are we going to deploy this type of technology? Is it actually going to be deployed just downtown Center City where the tourists come? Or are we actually going to be able to negotiate a contract where businesses get to benefit because they're in a high traffic, high tourist, high business area? But in addition to that, are we going to be partnering with the right companies and the right deployment partners that actually also care about the Philadelphia community? I think one of the biggest challenges for us is that we are, sixth largest city in the United States, but we also have the highest rate of deep poverty of any large city in the U.S. We have 26% poverty rate. We also have a very low rate of literacy. So, digital literacy aside, just basic literacy is a really big problem for us. So I think in terms of voice-powered types of access for adults that have low rates of literacy would be a huge benefit for us in terms of getting access to services and communicating with city representatives. But I also think that for us, we want to make sure that they are coming along with us on this journey of talking about smart city, about contributing to, what does smart city in Philadelphia really look like? What does that really mean? And I think the challenge is that when you talk to a lot of people who are really close to the problems or in the neighborhood level and the hyper local economic initiatives, they're not even thinking about 5G. They're just thinking about, how do we get more gardens and food in our neighborhood? How do we make sure the education system is going to be better maintained and sustained? And how am I gonna get to my job in less than 2 hours because I have to go pick up my kid after work? There's a lot of these day-to-day things that a lot of people in our community and all across the country are facing in terms of poverty, in terms of low access to transportation. So for us, we really have to think beyond just IoT, and we have to think beyond just technology and think about it from a much more holistic perspective. Are there supportive programs that we can actually bridge alongside the technology? A really great example of the way we talk about inclusion really quickly is through our public health department. We have something called air management services, and they deployed air monitoring sensors across the city, and we're continuing to expand that program. And the reason why they monitor the air quality is because they have found through data that a lot of areas of where there are high rates of asthma and deaths associated with asthma attacks are happening in areas where there are really, really high air pollution. And we're also finding that, correlating to the other data is that those are also high rates of poverty there. And they're often in areas that are post-industrial in Philadelphia. And so when you layer all those different data sets, we're able to get a much better picture of what we're dealing with, of what the really big problem is. And to us, that's a part of inclusion. It's about being able to highlight those stories and being able to direct our budget and our policy to help those communities.
I think we might have time for one or two very quick questions.
Thank you. Miriam Ramani with Global Cyber Alliance. Thank you so much to the panel. Really great discussion. I guess the question I have for the panelists is, when it comes to the promise of Internet of Things enabled smart cities, privacy and security could be hurdles to deployment. Yet, with all the smart city projects that are going around globally, there are a lot of good lessons learned that probably cities can start in some form of collaboration, learn from each other so that they don't repeat the same mistakes and provide that inclusion promise of technology. Are you working with other smart cities to learn from their best practices?
I think we're going to limit it to one person answering. So
the answer is a one-word answer, absolutely. Right? And that's part of sharing and part of learning is making certain that we're taking best practices and even worse practices and sharing and building off of them together.
All right, and then I think we have one more question.
Hey, this has been fascinating, a great conversation. Thank you guys for being here. This question is more for Ellen. How's the public sector, maybe Philadelphia specifically, adapted to your design thinking methodology, putting the consumer in the position to kind of be the developer as well? The private sector, we know is really good at the ready, fire, aim approach, but the public sector not so much. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
Well, actually, prior to the whole Smart City initiative happening in the city, my team actually manages a program that trains city employees in human-centered design thinking. And so essentially bringing different methodologies of how we frame our problems and our challenges and how we want to go about solving them. So we have a few initiatives under that. And so I think in terms of just thinking about who is in city government in Philadelphia, there has been a huge movement to get municipal leadership as well as their employees to start thinking differently about the way they are looking to be more strategic about the way their day-to-day work looks like. And I think this is something that's happening across the country. You have these innovation groups that are seated in government, and I think a part of that process is also bringing actually in the private sector practices into government as well. So you have programs in San Francisco like the Startup in Residence. We do a lot of shared learning across different sectors in Philadelphia. And so anytime we want to tackle a challenge, we think about reaching out to entrepreneurial communities in Philadelphia, reach out to our private partners to think through things. I mean, just in the back room, we tossed up like 10 different ideas and things that I'm sure we'll each bring to our respective colleagues when we go back home. So I think those kind of conversations are absolutely happening. And I think the other exciting thing is that government is now part of this whole tech race. And it's getting people in government to get excited, but also challenge themselves to think beyond what they thought their yesterday's role as a city official looked like and thinking about tomorrow.
All right. Well, we could talk about this all day. I think that's where we're going to stop. Everyone join me in thanking our panelists.